The US launched strikes around Iran's capital, Tehran, for the first time in its most recent wave of attacks. The Court of Justice of the European Union ruled that the Spanish amnesty law for Catalan separatists complies with EU legislation. Foreign ministers of EU member states have warned that China presents a threat to the EU's economy and its security. Dismissed Defense Minister Fedorov accused Ukraine's army chief of fueling divisions.
The US military said early Thursday it ended its latest wave of airstrikes targeting Iran. Strikes also reached into areas around Iran's capital, Tehran, for the first time of this latest round of violence, according to Iranian state media, who added that American strikes struck Kishem Island and the southern port city of Chabahar, as well as the northern Semnan province, which holds Iran's ballistic missile production and space program. Iranian officials say US strikes have killed more than 35 people and wounded more than 300. Meanwhile, the US says it fired a missile into a Curacao-flagged oil tanker's funnel after it ignored warnings while heading toward Iran's main oil export terminal. In retaliation, Iran fired missiles and drones targeting Jordan, Bahrain and Kuwait before dawn. On Wednesday, the US military resumed its airstrikes against Iran in broad daylight, as Washington said it was intensifying its campaign aimed at limiting Tehran's ability to threaten commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz.
It is a symbolic victory for Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez and a decision directly impacting the case of Catalan separatist leader Carles Puigdemont. The Court of Justice of the European Union ruled that Sánchez's amnesty law for Catalan separatists involved in the 2017 failed secession bid complies with EU legislation. The law was passed to secure the support of Catalan separatist parties so Sánchez could remain in power after he failed to secure a clear majority in the 2023 Spanish general election.
Siempre dijimos desde el Gobierno lo que hoy afirma rotunda y literalmente el Tribunal Europeo. La amnistía es un instrumento adecuado para apaciguar un conflicto político o social. La amnistía pretende reducir las tensiones institucionales y políticas generadas por el proceso de independencia de Cataluña y facilitar un escenario de reconciliación.
The Catalan Separatist Party, Together for Catalonia, welcomed a major victory.
Nosaltres considerem que avui és un dia transcendent. Avui és una gran victòria, jo crec que és una victòria rotunda de Catalunya en general i també de l'independentisme de manera particular.
Puigdemont, who currently lives in self-imposed exile in Belgium, continues to face arrest in Spain as he is accused of embezzlement. The final say rests with the Constitutional Court, which is examining the former president of the government of Catalonia's appeal for constitutional protection. The European Public Prosecutor's Office in Athens has brought charges against 22 defendants, including 4 sitting members of the Greek Parliament, as well as several former senior public officials and political figures, as part of an investigation into an alleged organized fraud ring involving the management of agricultural funds. Offences involved incitement to breach of trust and incitement to the illegal management of European funds. The European Public Prosecutor's Office announced that it had closed the case against 7 members of parliament who had been under investigation, as no evidence of criminal acts was found. The European Public Prosecutor's Office brought 5 counts of breach of trust against the former president of the agency responsible for distributing agricultural subsidies, 2 counts of breach of trust against the former Director General of Direct Payments, and charges of embezzlement and unlawful management of European Union funds against 2 of its former regional directors. Following the ruling's announcement, the Greek Prime Minister strongly criticized both the opposition and the European Public Prosecutor's Office, wondering who would now seek an apology from politicians who were smeared but against whom no evidence ultimately emerged. He even remarked that the European Public Prosecutor's Office appeared to be involved in internal party rivalry. Foreign ministers of EU member states have warned that China presents a threat to the EU's economy and its security. They said China holds asymmetric advantages over the EU through its economic and technological dominance, making it a critical long-term strategic challenge for the bloc. Tensions have escalated between the EU and China in recent months over trade. The EU set an October deadline to rebalance trade ties with Beijing through dialogue, as Chinese overcapacity threatens entire sectors of the European economy. But every recent move by Brussels to protect its market has prompted threats of retaliation from China, which controls rare earth supplies vital to the bloc's defense industry and green technologies. In their joint assessments of the risks posed by China, the ministers also described Beijing as a key enabler of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. They said that China and Russia seek to establish regional dominance and reshape the global order in line with their interests, fostering a return to a sphere of influence logic. A court in Italy on Thursday sentenced Giovanni Castellucci, the former chief executive of Autostrade per l'Italia, Italy's largest motorway operator, to 12 years in prison over the 2018 collapse of Genoa's Morandi Bridge. The disaster was one of Italy's deadliest infrastructure failures, claiming 43 lives. Another 556 people were displaced. Prosecutors had sought an 18-year and 6-month sentence for Castellucci. In all, 32 people were convicted and handed sentences ranging from 1 year and 11 months to 12 years. Others were either found not guilty or lesser charges had expired under the statute of limitations. Also convicted were Autostrade's former head of maintenance, Michele Donferri-Mitelli, who was sentenced to 11 years in prison. The former CEO of SPEA engineering company, Antonino Galata, received 5 years and 6 months. Defendants faced charges including negligence resulting in the collapse and manslaughter stemming from failures to maintain the bridge, which was part of a main route linking northern Italy with the French Riviera. President of the Morandi Bridge Victims Memorial Committee, Egle Possetti, said she was satisfied by the verdict. Castellucci's attorney, however, said he would launch an appeal, calling the verdict deeply flawed. Castellucci is already serving a final sentence of 6 years for the Monteforte-Irpino bus crash, perhaps the deadliest road disaster in Italian history. On the 28th of July 2013, a tour bus, due to a brake failure and the failure of the highway guardrails to hold it back, plunged into the void, killing 40 people. As thousands of Ukrainians took to the streets on Thursday to protest against President Volodymyr Zelensky's dismissal of Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov, the former minister claimed that his conflict with Ukraine's commander-in-chief had contributed to his removal. Fedorov said that Zelensky has been forced to choose between him and commander-in-chief Oleksandr Syrskyi.
Це призвело до того, що по факту він поставив ультиматум, як ми з вами знаємо. І замість того, щоб придумати, як асиметрично перемогти Росію, в чому задача главкома, він придумав, як розколоти країну, де ми сьогодні з вами знаходимося. І в цьому є велика проблема.
Fedorov modernized the military through technological innovation and a more decentralized approach. The dispute between the defense minister and the commander-in-chief was known in Ukraine and has been described as a generational clash between a young tech-driven reformer and a more conventional military commander. Meanwhile, Ukraine's parliament has appointed former Naftogaz chief executive Serhiy Koretsky as prime minister as part of President Volodymyr Zelensky's latest government reshuffle. Ukraine's recent advances targeting Russian maritime vessels and energy infrastructure is putting Kiev in a position of strength, European Commissioner for Defense Andrius Kubilius told Euronews.
Such kind of development should be a clear argument for Putin and his surrounding that he is not able to achieve any significant development in his war aims. And, that is the moment when really negotiations on just peace should start.
On European defence, Kubilius regretted that some countries are downscaling their initial ambitions for a share of the EU's €150 billion defence loan programme, known as SAFE, citing what he described as their own fiscal constraints. The EU is aiding Ukraine amid Russia's ongoing full-scale invasion through the provision of a €90 billion loan. During a visit to Kiev this week, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced a deal to jointly boost the production of drones.
Argentine fans were seen celebrating as their team made it to the World Cup final after beating England 2-1 in Atlanta on Wednesday. Once again, Argentina made its comeback near the end of the game, as going into the 85th minute, England was still leading 1-0. Argentina's goals were scored by Enzo Fernandez at the 85th minute of the game, while Lautaro Martinez's goal followed in overtime at 92 minutes. Meanwhile, England's Anthony Gordon scored at the 55th minute. The defending champions' victory means they will face Spain in Sunday's final in New Jersey. On Tuesday, Spain defeated France 2-0. Argentina already holds 3 World Cup titles, having won in 1978, 1986 and most recently in 2022 when they defeated France in a penalty shootout.